Outreach and Advocacy Committee to discuss the follow-up on resolutions and then propose kind of draft of what how we should handle outreach and advocacy efforts. And then I think we have one more thing, and that's, I'm just going to type it here so I can know what we're supposed to talk about. The social justice, and was that, I can't remember what it was, it called SJP, which is possibly talking to them around policing in schools. So maybe not policing in schools, but it's the response to the student bus incident, and if we want to take next steps. Or I'm also not really familiar with that organization, but yeah, we can. I'll circle back to that around at the end so we can get more discussion. And I apologize to everyone. I am at a hair appointment that lasted longer than expected, but it's okay because that's all we can multitask using digital. So the follow-up resolutions we discussed last time, there are, let me see, protecting homeless. So I wanted to see if anyone was interested in taking on, following up on what the steps were. Like, I know Emily is interested in the teacher retention of Black and Latinx, and I know I'm interested in supporting students with disabilities, making sure that gets some follow-up on that. But the 7 pending resolutions, are there any ones that stand out to someone, or does anyone have any ideas about what we should do? Basically, we'll be looking at whatever the resolution said and making sure that we follow through on those actions.
Well, I think that the teacher retention survey and the follow-up survey work with 20-5, 20-7, 20-9, recruitment and retention
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess that's in my ballpark.
Okay.
It says to recognize the importance of removing all police from DC public and charter schools. Isn't that a done deal?
I have to look and see what the board mentioned as what the follow-up was going to be. I don't have that document open at the moment, but I think we just need to look and see if, I know there's the contract. I'm not sure what charters are doing, and I'm also not sure what the resolution was from, like what the board last year said they wanted to do about that. But do you remember, Fraser, what was that resolution?
That was what it was about. It was about that we were for the removal of the SROs in the schools. That's what that resolution was. Now, it was a controversial, well, for us, it was a sort of controversial resolution. It wasn't unanimous, like I guess all of the resolutions we voted on have been unanimous. Of course, the board was different then, but it was about the supporting the removal of the SROs from the schools. But the council has voted on that, right? So I don't think they're having.
Yes, there's some movement, but I'm just not sure. Like, what did the State Board of Education say in its resolution? So, like, did it say like we're for it, and
no, it was against it.
We were.
It was. For
I'm sorry. Against.
It was for the removal.
For the resolution, yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But that resolution, I'm saying I'm saying this resolution passed to recognize the importance of removing that passed. So, I know the board passed the resolution, but in that resolution, were there any actions that we need to take is what the follow-up is, what I'm not worried about, but considering.
I don't remember the actions.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, my impression, just generally, and I do think the question about if there are actions we should take is a good one, but I feel like a lot of the resolutions are kind of like, they've been written in the past, at least, as actions unto themselves. They don't necessarily give clear steps on like what we should do. It just says like, it's our position that we're on record that X, Y, and Z should happen, not necessarily that we're going to do anything to make that happen.
Yeah, except for I do know for sure the ones with students with disabilities, it's the board is supposed to be following up on, like, it's in the resolution on a quarterly basis, and I don't think that's happened. So I mean, it's also something that we need to think about when we put through resolutions. If we're putting out action steps, making sure that whatever the board is committing to in those resolutions is getting done. But yeah, it could be for this one about policing that it was just to, say that we are in support of it and not any additional items. But I know for sure the Students with Disabilities resolution has follow-up action.
So Caitlin put the link to the resolution in chat, and there's nothing.
For that
it doesn't
one.
look like there's anything for us to do. I think.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I would be curious if, like, I know you said the one about students with disabilities has some follow-up items, but like I would be curious if that's best practice or like general, like if that's common that resolutions have action steps. I guess like I would assume that most of the resolutions don't have action steps.
I think, to be honest with you, the action part of anything that we do as a board is in the committees. So that the resolutions are really just, this is how we feel, not what we're going to do. But the committees, like the teacher retention committee was brand new last year. In 2019-20.
Well, there was a reason why the last meeting we highlighted these 7 as being, I think these are the 7. Or was it, did I look at the meeting notes wrong? Hold on, I could have did that too. Okay, committee members reviewed to examine which resolutions for action. They identified the following resolutions to revisit. Okay, so there was a reason why we marked these 7 resolutions as needing to revisit. I can't remember why we said that, but my impression was that we marked these as the board passed them and they have unfinished, quote, business. Like, and whatever the business is, I'm not sure.
No, I think you're right, except for the one about the police.
So that I marked that as resolved in the notes, man. Yeah. So we don't have to worry about that one.
Right.
I also don't have access to the meeting chat, so whatever's dropped in that one, I can't see.
It's just the only thing in the chat. The only thing in the chat is the police and schools resolution. I mean, I think that I wonder if, clearly not being able to remember, if these are just things that are timely. So like right now, the Police Reform Commission, they just released their report.
Right.
When I skim the resolution, it does reference specifically DCPS, the contract with DCPS. I'm not so sure. I feel like policing in schools is an ongoing conversation.
Okay.
And maybe that's why it was marked, as opposed to like there are steps in the resolution. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess we can gauge, but like, since you all can see the resolution, does it say that we need to do anything else with that, or is it just like we just said that we are, supporting like the removal? Like there's nothing else to follow up on.
Not in the police.
So there's
not in the police.
So I marked that one as resolved. For protecting homeless youth in the district, for those who have access to that resolution, is there anything in that resolution that says like we were supposed to do certain follow-up action?
I don't think the resolutions do that.
But I'm telling you, there's one, the Students with Disabilities one does. So I don't feel comfortable making a blanket statement of like all the resolutions don't offer follow-up items, because I do know there's one that does, and it could be the outlier.
And I think the teacher retention one, SR 20-7, I must have, see, the thing is, I pulled up this document about the police supposedly, but it didn't pull it up.
Can I ask a question? So like I'm reading through this police and schools resolution, and No, there's no action steps for us, but
Okay.
there are things. So like, um, I'm just going, since you can't see it, I'm just going to read. So it says, now therefore be it resolved to protect the safety and humanity of students of color and create supportive and nurturing school learning environments. The DC State Board of Education recommends that the Deputy Mayor for Education initiate a process beginning in the 2021 school year and allows adequate time, no less than 6 months, as indicated by school leadership, um, for each school to develop an adequate plan for alternative systems that maintain a safe and supportive learning environment in place of security. The planning process must include, there's details on that, and then there's alternatives to be considered. I guess I raised that because when I say like, I'm not so sure that there are steps for us in all of them. It does sound like we go on record is saying like, yes, we support something, but then like what we would want to see in the world, I guess. And so from
And I'm
that
also wondering.
standpoint, it's, I guess the resolution is not necessarily resolved. I don't know though. I think one of the questions I would have is, as things evolve and change, those things might be right, wrong. Like progress could be made and they not necessarily be those things. Because this is the moment in time when we pass a resolution. And so
I'm just curious if we even follow up with the DME, like that step about the 6, like what you read.
Yeah.
Because I know we had a DME at a working session, but I don't recall, it's been a while, but I don't think we talked about like, hey, DME, we passed that resolution last year. What's the update on exactly what you read about have all schools created a plan, it's also, I guess, another question of like, which we can like table or, think of an overarching theme of when we put those follow-up items, like, do those items make sense?
Right.
And that could be like something that makes sense, but it's just like, I don't like putting things, I mean, that was a new board, but like that, we did it and then like, now we don't have any follow-up. So, I mean, anyway, long story short, maybe we should just follow up with the DME. Sorry. There's lawn maintenance going, but maybe like follow up with the DME just to say like, hey, we passed a resolution last year. What is the status on schools creating plans? And that could just be kind of a checkpoint for now.
I think that's a great idea. Why don't each of us take, there are 7, I'll take 3. Take the resolutions and go through the resolutions real closely to see what kind of follow-up action and who we are supposed to talk to about the follow-up action, so that when we ask somebody to come to the business meeting, because they don't come to the public meetings, when we ask somebody to come to the business meetings, I think they should come to the public meetings, but they don't. But then we can question them. How do you feel about that? I mean,
I like that. And actually, Fraser, I'll only Emily an email about my thoughts for restructuring public meetings. So maybe I can include that in there. Like, those are the meetings that we would want the DME to be on record for. But yes, I like the idea. Maybe we could just each take a resolution, make sure there's no follow-up items, or make sure like, the follow-up items can be addressed. I'll take the student disabilities one. I know you're interested in the ones around teacher retention, the 7-5 SRO 5 through.
Yeah, I'll do 5, 7, and 9. Is that all right?
Yes, I'm writing you down. I'm taking probably better notes in the Google Doc because that's what I have in front of me.
I see it.
Okay, that's me typing in there.
This is my Google
Does
Doc.
Anybody? Can anyone?
I mean,
should we go through each one, or should we? I mean, go ahead, Emily. Rose.
I can finish up the police and schools one, and I guess I can do either the STAR framework or I don't particularly care, but I can do either one. like I don't have a preference, STAR framework or homeless youth in the district. I think what this exercise is making me think about too is just like, what is the as our committee structure, I guess, matures, with this committee in particular, what is the relationship between this committee and other committees? So like STAR framework, that sounds like something that should be that assessment and accountability committee. They probably would want to be part of the action steps on that because it's going to touch assessments and accountability.
Yeah.
But all we're doing right now is finding out the things, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying for the it's just something that's I'm flagging for myself or flagging for us.
Yeah.
Like, as we think about,
I think I'm on the assessment and accountability committee, so I'll put my name next to it to flag it to them.
yeah.
I think I'm on the assessment and accountability meeting, but I get what you're saying. Like, this is something that they should chime in on, so I can just raise it to them of, hey, we have a possible open resolution on this. What do you all want to do?
Right.
So
and like, here's the action steps we pulled out or whatever. Like, I don't know. I guess one of the questions that came up when we initially formed this committee was like, okay, like, is it a catch-all? Is it like, what's the relationship to other committees? And like, how do we navigate when there's overlap? And like, I wonder if part of our contribution is tracking more, like, and just saying like, okay, well, how are we moving things to resolution when there are these outstanding items, if that makes sense? Because it might very well be that I don't know, the one Fraser has for educated practice, that the educated practice committee, which I know I'm on too, would pick up a lot of the follow-up with the action items, and
Right.
that we would track or support as needed. But yeah, so I guess this exercise is just making me think about that, like, what does the shared work and overlap look like?
Yeah.
And it
Okay,
really,
I'll
like,
put that note.
that's a good point too, because all we're doing, because everything that we're doing on the boards supposedly should be advocacy. So we're just channeling the different things that we're working on to the other committees. Or we can be the voice of those committees. They could channel stuff to us, right? We don't know. Since we just trying to identify who we are as a committee, it could be either way that we're doing that. We could be the
yeah, I made a note I made a note later on. Okay, so I think we're good on this one in regards to, and I thank you everyone for, basically taking the resolutions that we identified as possibly having loose ends and exploring how we can possibly close those loops. And we'll just review that at our next Outreach and Advocacy Committee meeting. I'll just make a note to the board that we are following up on these when we our working session, that we are following up on 7 resolutions that we feel possibly need some follow-up action. The next area was, and I'm in the Google Docs, which will hopefully become like maybe a nice infographic. I don't know. But I was thinking about, like, how do we handle outreach and advocacy efforts? And I outlined like 4 situations, understanding that not everything is going to fall nice and neatly into these processes. But I do, and I think what we're feeling is, we're in a meeting or we see something bubble up. And, it's like, okay, Outreach and Advocacy Committee, it's on you. And so, so we have a fair process for addressing these, when outreach and advocacy efforts come online. I kind of created, like, if this happens, here are the kind of steps. So the 4 areas that I listed, one area I'm not sure we should get into, but the 4 areas I listed is, 1, a process for when proposed areas for advocacy come from board members. So it could be, I'm not going to pick on Zach, but it could be like Zach reaching out and saying like, or I think the last meeting he mentioned, what was it? The TANF and SNAP benefits is an area that outreach and advocacy could possibly take on. Another one is like testimony from public hearings. What do we do with that? And then I have yearly actions, and then I've created a fourth one, which is emergencies, but I'm not sure if emergencies we should have a formal process for, or I haven't fleshed that out. So going back to the first one is proposed areas for advocacy from board members. So in the case of picking on Zach again, Zach brings up an area for advocacy. In this case, it might be TANF, SNAP, or any area where any board member brings it up. I propose that this body brings it to the committee. The committee assesses for, and sorry, there's typos, I had to see one. This committee assesses for equity, connection to board responsibilities, connection to the advocacy agenda. We propose follow-up steps to the SBOE, which can include, so yeah, 3 steps basically. Bring it to the committee. We assess, the relevance of this whatever advocacy effort, and then we kick it back to the SBOE based on our review, what steps the State Board of Education should take. So it could be, do we do a letter? Do we do a resolution? Do we, does it, this is more for a board member as an individual board member to take up, given their unique circumstances, or, should we elevate it to council? I don't know. So what do you all think about those 3 steps for that one scenario when a board member proposes advocacy? On how we process.
All right, so why don't you want to use that, the thing that about the bus incident as an example?
I don't want to, just because I know there is some legal follow-up on that one. I would, but I'm not sure how comfortable I feel like going through that one.
Okay,
I don't, yeah. But let's pick one from last year since we're doing busing. Let's say the homeless shelter area, busing from the homeless shelter came up. And pretend like it's current, what would how we process that issue? Like a person brings it to the committee.
Okay, who would bring it to the committee?
We actually let's use a current one. So let's use let's use a current example. So the current one is Zach brought up, that families accessing TANF and SNAP as a possible, area for advocacy from the State Board of Education, getting more families to enroll or make sure they access. No, is it like basically create a commission? So I guess bringing it, who proposed that would be like a board member. So Zach brought it up. Bringing to committee would be bringing to the, we would discuss it during an outreach and advocacy committee.
Okay, and then we talk about all those things that you have listed.
So then Zach brought it.
I would think somebody would say, well, is that really within our purview? I'm being the devil's advocate. Is that really within our purview? What can we do about TANF and SNAP as a board besides screaming? Do we write a resolution about that?
So I think that would be kind of like step 3. Yes, Fraser. So Zach would have hypothetically brought that issue up as a board member. Then as the outreach and advocacy committee, we would assess it. So we would say, does it fall under the board responsibilities, kind of, I guess, as listed on the website or in our bylaws? We would say, does it align with our advocacy agenda, assess for equity? Like we would make I guess we would have a response to Zach of like, this is where the committee landed. And it could, so that would be basically step 3.
So I think overall, this makes sense. I do think I would, with issue raised, I think the like what we are taking into account or our assessment, I would like that to be more publicly facing, or to the board, like at least so the board member. So like I would want the board member, when they raise the issue, to I don't think they have to make like a whole case, but whatever it looks like, but they should be, they like, I think the thing that would be most helpful for me, because I've asked myself this, is like, when does the board take an issue on? And I think that's a conversation that as a board, we need to be on the same page about. And so I feel I don't want it to be that it's like, we go into a room and decide, and like, like I think these are filters we all should be using, if that makes sense. So like Zach called me about this, about the TANF thing, because he was saying, 5, 7, and 8 are most affected, which is true. And I said to him that I had spoken with the food bank, the people from Capital Area Food Bank, and I told them that it would be helpful if they worked with DCFPI, and I told Zach he probably would benefit in reaching out to DCFPI because they've already been working on this issue. And Capital Area Food Bank is in a place where they've done programming and direct implementation, and now they're starting to think about the policy. But that there is actually, there are people who know more than we do, who are, who are, I would say we're on the same side of the issue as far as wanting to make sure kids eat, that the action, in my opinion, the next step was following up with them before we developed and went and tried to come up with a recommendation for somebody else. Especially because it's not something that is not squarely in our purview. And sometimes we're not best positioned to champion something. And so like us thinking about as a board, like when do we take something on, like what avenue, what tools we have at our disposal, when do we possibly partner, and or if there's something that maybe the board doesn't take on, but is a ward-based effort or ward-based advocacy, like how do we differentiate? Because what I worry about is in nonprofit speak, we call it mission drift. And it's everything that comes down the pipe that you get excited about, you just respond to. And that's not, I mean, while I get it, like while there are so many things that could possibly affect kids that we should care about, there is a question of like where we can be most effective. And when we as a board need to step up or step back, because it is both about, if for me, I guess I'll tell you my point of view. For me, it is about, accomplishing, like doing the best we can, but ultimately accomplishing the goal. And sometimes you're not the person or the group that's best positioned to carry the water. You need to kind of hand a baton to somebody else. But I don't know that we have some kind of collective agreed upon bright lines around where we focus our energy at any given time.
It's about results. It's about getting results. When you were talking, Ebony Rose, I was thinking about the outdoor learning, and we spent a lot of time on the board, advocating for outdoor learning, but we don't have. We've got absolutely no dog in the race as far as the decision making about outdoor learning. I mean, the powers that be will talk about, oh, that's a great idea, but if you think about it, people have been talking about outdoor learning for about 8 months now, and there are little nuggets of outdoor learning happening. If the system went all into outdoor learning 6 months ago, we'd be a lot further along in things educationally. But we spent a lot of time talking about outdoor learning, but it was indoors when we were talking about it, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be like that's one of the things that we go back and say, like, then board, individual board members, then you can, advocate on, at your ward level of doing either events on your own or, picking up. But basically the board, did the letter. That was pretty much the extent of what we could do, as a collective body. But then I know each individual ward member kind of, did
Right.
some either events in their ward or something like that. So, okay. So it seems like, so we kind of have a proposed steps for when a board member brings the issue up, which is basically an issue is raised from a board member during a public meeting or working session. I said those because Ebony Rose mentioned, we want to make sure that it's very transparent of a process. Then during an outreach and advocacy committee meeting, which is also public since these are recorded, we would discuss the C part of this, which is, does it connect to what the board is doing? Does it connect to, our mission? Does it connect to, and what tools we have at our disposal? Is this a board versus a ward level thing? And then I would say D is basically come back with, for all the issues raised. This is what this committee landed on. So it could be, okay, for outdoor learning, all right, we would just basically say or write or something just really quickly of like, okay, based on the information that we have at the time, the Outreach Advocacy Committee recommends, this board write a resolution and the individual ward members, as they see fit, have outdoor learning events or connect with resources, something like that. The issue is that, or not the issue is that, but the issue with the, Capital Area Food Bank, this group advises XYZ based on, again, what we have at our disposal. So I think we fleshed through some of the steps for that one. I do think, though, a bigger question still with Ebony Rose is that I would like to see, or I'm not sure if it's in our purview to decide for the board, is that when do we necessarily take it up? And I guess it could be basically we give our recommendations, present it to the board as a whole, and let the board say, great, or we want to do more. So I guess basically we only can come up with recommendations from this committee. For public testimony. Go ahead.
Can I just throw something out about, because I didn't know anything about the State Board of Education when I came on the State Board of Education. I mean, nothing. I knew nothing. And there was a lot of, because it was a different board. This board's different. All right. I feel as though everybody's at least in the same chapter, not necessarily on the same page, but they're in this. And the board that I was on before, they weren't even in the same library, some of them. And so it would we can't do that because that's not our job. And see that, and that was being advocates for students and being advocates and speaking up about inequities. And that wasn't our job. We were just supposed to do the thing that it said in the job that the board has is to advise the superintendent's office about attendance regulations or some junk like that. That's not, so there isn't any, I mean, if you look at our charge, all of this is not what we're supposed to be doing anyway. But that's not the way this board is working. That's not what you ran on. That's not what I ran on. We ran to be a voice for the students and the parents and the teachers. And so anything that we want to talk about, as far as I'm concerned, is legit. So there isn't a parameter as far as we can't do that, but we also have to understand, and I brought up the outdoor learning thing, is because the chancellor gave us all this lip service about the system is going to do outdoor learning and everything like that. It hasn't been done. There hasn't been anybody, the mayor hasn't said anything about, we want outdoor learning 1 day a week or something like that. I mean, there hasn't been anything done. So we have to it's really raising our voices about everything, but we have to pick our battles too.
Yes, I'm definitely about picking battles. Okay, so and I tried to capture everything within the notes there. For testimony from public hearings, I put proposed because this is, I guess, my favorite area is hearing what the public has to say about, education issues. So I was saying for that one, based on all the testimony received during a monthly meeting, the themes will be collected. So it could be, one person talked about sports, 5 people talked about teacher retention,
Right.
and then again, so that information is collected. Then at the following Outreach and Advocacy Committee meeting, we will review and determine next steps based on what we hear from the public.
And that's the great
any
thing.
Feedback from that?
That's the great thing about us doing this online and being able to record everything with our meetings, is because we didn't have this kind of, like Darren does a great job of putting together whatever is going on in the meetings, what the bullet points are and things like that for us to read and to remember about what happened at the meeting. But we didn't have that the first couple of years that I was on the board. There wasn't any kind of summary. There might have been a small summary, but it was all live.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have it all on tape and also a written minute record of what went on. And it's really helpful because last year we had that meeting where there were 50 people that testified, and almost all of them testified against schools reopening. But their testimony was powerful, 50 times powerful, and really helpful. And the mayor changed her mind about the reopening of schools the day after we met. Now, I don't know, I'm sure she wasn't watching. I'm not that naive, but somebody was. And it wasn't just a coincidence.
Gotcha.
Because I agree with what you're saying about how important public testimony is.
Yes, because I feel like that one could be one that we can really, demonstrate. Some fairness can be demonstrated, because even though one person might raise an issue, that person could be, sounding the alarm for greater issues, or it just could be an issue that doesn't have a lot of backing, but something we need to be paying attention to. So I'm convinced that public comes to testify in front of us because they want to consider, raise our awareness about an issue, or follow up on an issue. And I think it's just an opportunity for us to, acknowledge the public's time for taking to come out to testify in front of us. Then the third area is yearly actions. I am proposing that, and again, it might not be under our purview, but kind of making sure there's a joint budget letter similar to what we did, and then a joint oversight letter to accompany that monetary ask.
When you say a joint,
I'm sorry, fiscal letter.
When you say a joint budget letter, are you talking about the budget for the State Board of Education, or are you talking about the education?
I think education in general. So I know this year we make some recommendations for fiscal asks from the mayor, right?
Yeah, so there's two, we do two. So one seems to come from the admin committee, I guess, which are recommendations about our own agency budget. And then there's the one we did, which is about the larger education budget. I think you're talking about the one that's for the larger education budget and how and what priorities we have, which makes sense to me. And also the oversight makes sense to me too, because it's an opportunity for us to reinforce and lift up the things people do bring to us at public meetings. Because that's what the oversight process is all about, is you highlight the good, the bad, and the ugly of the past year and making a case for what you want for the next year. And I would say that as a board, since we have a monthly meeting that people come to and express their concerns, we would be uniquely positioned to give, to give voice to that. And, it would, and I think it would be a value add to those who, show up and don't have any other place to go. We should be passing that information on.
How much of a problem would it be for us to put together a one-pager of bullet points about things that were mentioned but haven't been acted on at every one of our, I guess, business meetings? Like what happened last month? What did we act on last month? Like, so at our business, I mean, if in a perfect world, for our business meeting in next week, we would give everybody a little presentation about things that were mentioned and things that were acted on in the past month. Does that make sense?
I would defer to, yes, I'm following you because I agree. I don't like talking about some things about trying to follow up on it at least, or have an intention to follow up on it if I can. But I would defer to the our state board staff because, or who would take on that charge? I agree, but I'm tracking what you're saying, Fraser. I'm just Caitlin, I'm relying on any insight.
I don't think it'd be too much work. I already do a tracking after every public meeting for like who is testifying and the subject of their testimonies. During our public meetings, the staff is taking notes on everybody's testimony, so it shouldn't be too hard, I don't think. So Fraser, are you suggesting that at every working session, part of the advocacy and outreach committee readout is like that kind of summary, like between
it could just be a highlight reel, a very small one, but just like, because we had these, I thought the testimony about literacy was fascinating, right? But I think we need to review or refresh or whatever button you have to push on the computer to remember we talked the experts talked about literacy and what they did in those different states, and but what action has been taken since then.
Okay, yeah, that's doable. So we can work on something like by Monday so you guys can review it and see, oh yeah, this is okay, so that Carlene can read it out during the working session.
Okay, that'd be great.
Alrighty, sounds like a plan.
Cool.
Hey,
all good.
That's awesome.
So I think we're good on like yearly actions of those two letters. The last area that I didn't touch, and I don't know if we should touch it, or if you guys have any just general guidance on when emergencies pop up. So without getting too in detail, but we see things like a lot of times we're privy to just information on social media because we're getting tagged. I think that's going to be one that's going to be kind of like a fly by the seat of our pants thing. But I'm not sure if you all, in your experience, have any ways to, or thoughts on like, should we formalize emergencies or should we just treat them like the true fires that they are, and try to just circle as a board and have somebody contact OSI, contact whoever's involved. Like, I'm not sure your thoughts on those.
When the murders happened in Atlanta, and Alistair gave a powerful testimony, is that the kind of emergency you're talking about?
No, but that's good to think about too, though, Fraser, because I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking, for instance, the police called to the bus situation that we were all aware of, that day through social media, through our own communication channels. But yeah, it could be. Unfortunately, I mean, that could be. We're not ever looking forward to any of those type of. But it could be an emergency situation at school that is going to require a quick response from the State Board of Education member. Do we want to formalize that in any way? Like, these are the steps we should take, or
I think
could we just do a quick email of like, hey, go ahead.
I think playing it by ear, as you have there, I think playing it by ear is what it is. I mean, because think about, okay, it's last year at this time, and nobody knew what the hell was going on with schools. They were trying to coddle together some kind of a plan with kids having devices and things like that. It was like 3 months of playing it by ear. And it wasn't, it didn't have to be that way. But we were right. That's when the state board, as far as I know, I mean, I didn't even know who the person was that I took the place of. I never knew anything about the Ward 4 representative on the state board at all. But the thing about the state board got a lot of visibility starting with COVID, starting with us being on YouTube and all this other, and being online, because we, it just got a lot more traction. But we were playing it by ear too. And I think that's what happens in emergencies. You got to react to it. You got to figure out what to do, because you don't know what to do. It's like being a parent, right? Now y'all aren't parents, but I've been a parent for 50. My daughter just turned 51, so I've been a parent for a half a century, and you don't know what you're doing as a parent. Baby's born, and it's like, what do we do? And then you practice, and hopefully you get better at it, so that the fifth child gets all the benefit of the 4 children. But and that's what happens with, we have to learn how to react and how to be responsible to our constituents. Are we reacting personally, or are we reacting as the State Board of Education members? I mean, because I don't get a lot. I don't know how many phone calls y'all get. I don't get too many phone calls from my constituents about problems. I wish I did, but I put my numbers out there and my email out there at every meeting I go to, but I still don't get too much response about things. I mean, I try to see people and everything that I can, but you just gotta. So I'm really just reacting about things. I mean, they knew why they voted for me, what my views were, so I'm just going by who I am. And you got voted, like Ebony Rose defeated an incumbent, and I didn't defeat an incumbent, but I defeated the mayor's candidate. So, so I know what they voted for me for, so that's what I'm doing. Of course, the second time I ran, I didn't run against anybody, so.
Exactly.
That was
so, okay, I will leave this one as maybe whenever we do a document, just like a bullet of like, there's certain situations that some members will just wait for guidance from SBOE leadership because they are, emergency situations, something like that. But I agree, we might not need to flesh that one out. Is that Ebony Rose?
Yeah. I'm not so sure. I agree that we may not need to flesh it out. I'm not at all going to be troubled or disturbed as an oldest child by Fraser's assertion that we don't figure it out to the 5th kid, because that means my parents never figured it out, because we stopped at 4. But I think I would, the first thing my mind jumped to is like, what constitutes an emergency? And what are our expectations for responsiveness? So, yeah, like I think sometimes like I think about so like I think about the email this weekend around like if we were going to weigh in or not. And it was like, have you seen this email? And it came out on a Sunday. And like, the more I thought about it, I was like, this is not an emergency. But it was treated like an emergency.
What was that one? Can you?
That was about like, should we weigh in on the research or not? Because somebody else, because they were having a meeting, and I was like, this is not an emergency. And here's why.
Am I not on that email stream? I don't know.
You could have missed it completely, because it literally was like,
I know I wasn't checking email on this Sunday, so
exactly. And that's part of my point. It's like, essentially, someone raised the issue. I don't know if it was somewhere between Friday and Saturday, and then there was a letter from the leadership that they wrote really quickly, and they were like, we need to chime in on this by Monday. And then upon a further evaluation, it was like, this might not actually be an emergency.
Yeah, I responded to that way.
Yeah, I was like, I thought you responded. And so I don't, I do, and maybe this is like a retreat kind of question, but like, what constitutes an emergency, and like, what is our positioning, and when do we chime in to certain things? Because those were some of the questions that came up for me. Because what I do think is important is to a lot of the conversation we had before around like public comment, being a place where people can come and raise their concerns, because clearly that's lacking, in my opinion, in our literally in our structure as an education system. I think that's important. What I do have concerns about is whoever gets to us first and say it's an issue that we automatically, even if I'm sympathetic to that particular party, because in this case, I'm super sympathetic to the concerns raised. Upon further evaluation, I was like, I don't know if this is for us to chime in. Like, we're not a bully, we're not a referee, we're not like, there were other things. So I think as we start to build more muscles around advocacy and engagement, and hopefully more things come in front of us, we have to think about what are our precedents for action as a group, and when do we weigh in? When is it? And when are things like formal actions versus like less formal actions? So like, I suggested some less formal actions, which started with like, maybe we should have a conversation about this so we can get on the same page before we, send a letter, because it's not always a letter. Like, I think that and this is my observation, as the board has become more vocal, as we have become more visible, some of we can't necessarily, we have to evolve a bit. And it seems to me that our default was to send a letter or sign a resolution, and that was the action in and of itself, because we didn't really have our footing in the education landscape per se. Like, we are like, when it comes to, there are going to be things that people bring up that are legitimate, and we're going to have to decide what, not that this was illegitimate, but there are legitimate, do require action, and we're going to just have to decide as a leadership body in the education space, how are we in conversation with, like, what tools do we use? Like, when is it a flashlight? When is it a hammer? When is it, something else? When do you get more flies with honey? Though we don't, and I don't know if as a board, I feel like some of these things are things that aren't necessarily things that advocacy committee decides, but that as a board, we should have some shared expectations around. Like, we have to develop those muscles together. I think we have more questions than answers when it comes to how we see that. And not that it has to be perfect. We don't have to all be on the same page or the same paragraph or word from word, but we should be in the same book.
Can I piggyback on that a little bit?
Sure.
Because what Ebony Rose was saying about weight, there's a difference between a lightweight and a heavyweight. And we need to have gravitas in what we do. And I think that if we're the advocacy and outreach committee, then maybe we should be the filter before anybody makes a decision about going public. And when I say going public, that means, well, we need to write a letter about this or whatever, but it needs to be vetted. Maybe it needs to be vetted. Maybe that is one of our tasks as the advocacy and outreach committee, to vet stuff before it comes from the president and the vice president.
I'm also hoping they would vet some things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I would, that's the one that I would want to hear the rest of the board, if that's what they would want us to do, or if we have elected leadership to, you know, trust that they will make some good judgments, about what is issues. But I guess for me, in regards to what an emergency is, I was actually thinking, not necessarily what board members label as an emergency, but like what we were noticing from like the public. Like if there was a public event that something happened in landscape education DC that, you know, is it like, you know, a one-off horrible thing that happened because horrible things happen, or is it like this is a glaring preview of something that's going horribly wrong in the system that we need to speak up about? Or it could also be just like, you know, a news event, something, you know, like what happened in Atlanta, or if something unfortunately were to happen in our school, something like that. I don't know. But I wasn't thinking about emergency of like a board member were to hop in our email on, and I still don't know what the email is about. But you know, if I were to, I'll pick on myself. If I were to hop on y'all's email tonight and say I need a response by Sunday, that's not an emergency. But you know, there are going to be things that are going to happen in the landscape of DC that I think this board should be able to mobilize fairly quickly. And I think we actually do a good job sometimes, without any like formal processes of like, you know, reaching out to who we can reach out to, you know, even with Liz, I would consider that an emergency in a sense of, you know, members quickly circle, you know, let's confirm certain details first before, you know, moving as a unit. And I think we collectively did that. So I think that's what I'm talking about.
That's a really good
things
example.
That are kind of noteworthy.
Yeah.
That's a great example, Carlene.
Yeah. I think that's helpful. Yeah. I think I agree with Fraser that that's a good example. I think that's helpful. And I think that having that shared language and understanding is important for the full board. Like what is an emergency? You know, like especially because we are things do happen in the world. That's a reality. And we care about what's happening in the world. We don't want to just operate like in a vacuum or like little ostriches with our heads in the sand. And it's like, oh, this happened and we don't care. And we are, you know, we are a body. And so that's why I said, maybe it's something that's like we give some space to at a retreat or something. Cause I just don't know that we always think about emergency in the same way.
That's a great point.
Or like, yeah, like I just, yeah.
Who
Your point about like judgment and like how we vet things before we bring them. Like, I want to make sure that I am respecting I have a lot of respect for the people on the board. And so I want to make sure that I am understanding and respecting what's important to each individual as colleagues, and reconciling that with like how we navigate when is it something that we collectively take up as a board. Because sometimes it's going to be, yeah, that's important and I can support you, you know, as an individual. And sometimes it's going to be, okay, now we got to move this to champion it as a board together, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, definitely. And the thing happened with that, now I remember when that thing came out last weekend, the good thing about it was that, oh, I didn't think about that. Happened, all right? Because sometimes we make judgments about things and we do them individually and we don't think about the ramifications of how other people look at it. And the great thing about this particular board is I really do believe that everybody is looking at the big picture the same way.
I do too.
Yeah, they see an elephant. They're not a blind man trying to figure out, bunch of blind men trying to figure out what animal it is. And it's, so that was a good example of taking into consideration other people's opinions and not doing something. Because when I was thinking about, did y'all go to the Black Lives Matter march in the spring or the summertime? The big one that was downtown.
A lot.
There was
There was
like,
one. I did one in summer with Al Sharpton, that group, but then I remember when they first opened up Black Lives Matter Plaza, I was there. It was a lot of marching this summer.
Oh, it was that one big march on a Saturday that my children went to.
I think, yeah, I
And
might have been that one.
I'm only asking because I didn't go to it because I didn't feel like marching that long. I've been to other marches in my life, but I just I didn't need to do that. But my son and my daughter went, and it was there, and I wanted them to go. I wanted them to experience what it was like to be in that kind of a march. And that was early in the, when most of the marches had masks on, but then the next week the white people had a march and nobody wore masks, kind of thing. But those are individual. We should be able to make individual judgments about what we do. As I don't have to ask y'all if I'm going to write a letter to the editor. All right. I will tell John Paul that I'm going to write a letter to the editor or whatever. And that's what we should do. But those are things, like you were saying, those are things that need to come up at the retreat. I think we need to have some kind of a poll or some kind of a thing to make sure that those things are mentioned during the retreat. Because I don't see y'all as being inexperienced members of the board at all. I haven't seen that from the first meeting. But I also know there are things you don't know.
right.
And no one's told you. And so we could just have a session where people could brainstorm things about, what did you learn?
I'll put it as an action item to, I know Zach was asking for topics for the board retreat. So I'm putting like shared agreements on board actions as a retreat item, and that'll be a follow-up item.
Great.
Okay, last thing, and I hope we can just end this before 4:30. And just to get you all feedback on, so we were talking about, is it the Social Justice Project? The group that reached out to Emily, or Emily's going to reach out to, I can't remember, but the two topics that we wanted to discuss was, okay, great. I'm not familiar with, I need to get familiar with their mission, vision, and that sort of thing. But I guess the bigger scale of it was the DYRS situation with, we have youth who have not been receiving special education services. But then the bigger issue for me is why do we have 100% of our youth in DYRS with IEPs? That seems like both issues, but it seems like a systemic issue. And then definitely. The school, yeah, because I'm no people are saying like they're not getting their services, but that 100% of our youth and youth retention are children who have IEPs.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
okay, cool. And then also following up about the situation where the youth, the police were called to respond to a youth on a school bus. And I know OSSI is not talking too much to us because it's an open legal case. But do we want to figure out following up of with their process for when police are involved, what's going on about the busing situation? Are they planning on updating something? What's going on to kind of close the loop? So Emily was suggesting that we talk to the Social Justice Project as a start. But these are just two issues around, I guess, advocacy, something that I've just noticed recently that do you want to consider board actions? What are your thoughts on following up? Are you guys okay? We just have a conversation with them? Are there other steps that people are feeling or aware of, other tools that you all are aware of that we can exercise or use? Or
I think it should be a panel.
what should we do? Okay.
A panel at the public meeting.
I think, so I don't know, I have no idea, I'm gonna be honest, what's on our public meeting agenda for the next, like looking outward and like when a panel, something like that could happen, if that makes sense. Like I don't have a good,
I don't
have a realistic expectation for that. I do wonder if it makes sense for us as a committee to have an initial conversation, like maybe they can come to one of these meetings, so we can just learn some more, which might actually help us, because I don't know, like I could make some assumptions, like AJE, Advocacy for Justice and Education, and a couple others that might benefit from being on the panel. But like I would like to understand, we all saw the what happened, the bus incident. We saw what happened on social media. What I don't have a sense of, and I would like to understand better before formulating any advocacy actions, is like where that fits into how is that in a irregularity, or is that like the expectation of the policy? Because
I'm worried about having been in a situation probably twice, we're going to think about it, where police had to not necessarily intervene, but were called because of a situation of like literally student jumping out the back of a bus. You're going to call the police, like that. Or even a situation where like a police could have came on the scene and it could have went all bad. So I'm curious, just kind of like what I would love to see OSCE's policy on, like why or when or what. I agree, more information, and then this whole reform. Yeah,
I don't understand. And so as the State Board of Education, that in my opinion, part of what we care about is like what are the policies? Like what are the standards we're setting for kids? I would like to better understand what are OSCE standards for this. And not to say that whatever we have is fine, but I don't know how you identify where there could be challenges or opportunities if you don't know what the thing is. And there might, so like I would like to better understand what is OSCE's policy around transportation. And
I tried to look it up. I could not readily find
it. Doesn't seem to exist like publicly. So
okay. I thought it was me. All right, gotcha.
Let me ask a question. I watched that thing and it looked to me as though the police officer was really between the rock and the hard place, because the police officer really didn't. I mean, it was a female, right? And she was called, but she didn't really know why she was there.
Right.
Isn't that what happened? Because it was really between the bus driver and the parent more than the police officer.
And I think it was also something about protocol, which is
right.
Yeah. And so, fortunately, this, whoever the officer arrived on scene knew that there was no intervention needed. But then I also know if they're called, they can't.
They gotta come.
Like they can't come. Yeah.
Right.
So my thing is, but why? I think we're stuck on like why was this a situation where that was the response? But I also would like to. It goes back to Ebony Rose's question of, well, what are OSCE standards? Where is this written protocol? Because I tried to Google to see. I know they won't talk to us much. Because of the open case, but I want to see like where is that written and what case, what, like why was that the solution? So yeah, I think it starts on like how do we find OSCE standards, and I think how can maybe this group circle back on these two issues of what's going on with our youth youth involved in, juvenile justice and the systemic issue of they all have IEPs. And then also like the interventions that are in place, like and who the solutions around like who is responding. Because I think, who's responding to cases in this situation? Because it just, I can foresee, especially in that situation, just a whole variety of other solutions that would not have tied up that the police is a resource when we got all these other issues going on in communities. So, so I guess a long way to say we'll table that one to get more information on both issues. To talk about it at this committee.
Yeah, but to answer your question as far as like, should we engage them? Or like, I think it would be okay to have, and then like, maybe we can invite the Social Justice Project and maybe AJ. I think AJ is the other body to one of our committee meetings to just help us in our information gathering. In anticipation that it makes sense to put together a panel for the larger board as well. But
I think that was the biggest pushback I had with the concept, because it looked like the social justice was being pushed to past us rather than us that was why I said we need to hear what they have to say before we do anything else. And the other thing is we also need to work on being able to listen to what OSSI has to question OSSI about what they do. Because we get the state superintendent who gives us her remarks at the beginning of our public meeting, but we can't ever ask them any questions.
Why is that? Is that just
because that's how they used to do it. That's why we need to break the mold a little bit as far as what we're doing on the State Board of Education. It's not written.
It's just the expectation at this point. That's just how it's been. So
well, it's like, because we should be able to question public officials in front of the public. And I don't know how you feel about all of the answers that the chancellor has given at our business meeting. I'm still waiting for one. And I know this is recorded.
I know Carlene said 4:30 we're going to end this meeting, and I support that. I do. I think this falls into the category of what Carlene raised earlier and on email as far as like how we use our public meetings. And so I'm going to reserve my thoughts for that conversation, because it's a larger question for me. Like I think
that's a retreat. That's a retreat thing.
Yeah.
And I questioned initially the concept of the retreat on a Friday, because then Alex and Shayla couldn't come. So now that's why I hope that's why they pushed it to an unknown. I don't know. And how do y'all feel about having going to a restaurant and having a retreat?
What you mean?
I am vaccinated, preferably outdoors. With still, I like wearing my mask.
Outdoor thing. I'm 2 shots now, so I'm good. But I'm willing to go outdoors with people. I don't believe in indoor dining during COVID. That's just my.
No, I know. I'm talking.
That's just where I'm at with it. Like I just don't believe in it.
We could have a picnic or something. If it's a retreat.
If we found an outdoor place to do it in person, I would be open to that. Because we haven't actually seen each other, and if that's a way for the board to bring me some things as far as like, I think y'all got t-shirts or at least like a polo or something. I feel like I need some SBOE things so I can SBOE member, and I don't have any of that. If that's the easy way for me to get that and some cards, I'm with it.
Oh, you don't have cards yet?
No, they ordered them, but I don't, and that
Oh.
could be a USPS issue because I sent Christmas cards to people, and one just came back 3 days ago.
They
So
didn't,
there's that.
they always give the cards out at the meetings. But since we don't have meetings, that's probably why. I don't have any idea what time it is because I don't have a clock on my computer.
So we'll it's 4:25. So we'll table the advocacy agenda, but that might be one I also just propose to the board to talk about during our retreat as well. But follow up I have is for this group to committee to have AJE and SJP, the Social Justice Project, to come talk to us at a meeting on the 2 issues that we talked about. And then I'm gonna follow up with Zach about the board topic, or the retreat topics of shared agreements on board actions, and then maybe even sneak in our advocacy agenda. And then that's what I have. So thank y'all.
Caitlin, wait a minute, Carlene. I'm going to interrupt you because Caitlin, can you send the resolutions to all of us?
Like a link to every single resolution?
Yeah.
Okay, sure, I'll do that in an email.
The seven resolutions. Yeah.
Okay, sure thing.
Great. All right, ladies.
Well, I appreciate y'all's time on Friday. And y'all be safe. I will talk to you, I guess, on Wednesday, if not before.
Okay, great.